and welcome back to Africa Live. Late this week, the trial of Theodore Wafer concluded. He was being tried for the murder of a 19-year-old African woman that he killed for knocking at his door. Thandisizwe Chimurenga is a revolutionary journalist who wrote, no doubt, The Murderers of Oscar Grant. And no doubt she connects the systemic state-sanctioned violence against young black males nationally through the lens of the Oscar Grant murder. She went to Detroit recently to cover the trial of Theodore Wafer and the death of Renisha McBride, and she's still there. Thandi, thank you for joining us today here on Africa Live.
Thank you for having me.
So, Thandisizwe, can you tell us who is Renisha McBride?
Renisha McBride.
Thank you.
Was a 19-year-old sister. She was a worker. She had gotten a job at the Ford factory out here through a temp agency. So we know that all workers are exploited, so she must have been a super exploited worker because she was working at a temp agency. She had, on the night of November 1st, she was at home with one of her good friends from junior high school. They were playing a game of shots. You know, the loser at the card game has to take a shot of alcohol. She kept losing, so she had to keep consuming the alcohol until finally she didn't want to do that anymore. And she told her friend that. Her friend said, if you not going to play the game correctly, then I'm leaving. So, you know, she and the friend, they had been doing this game. They had been getting high at the time. And at a certain point, her mother came home and scolded her because she had not gotten the chores done. So Renisha left the house. We think she may have been going to see a friend, but at a certain point around 1:30 a.m., she crashed her car, maybe about a mile or so from where this friend lived. We know that she had a slight concussion. She hit her head on the windshield. The witnesses at the scene stated that she was holding her head. They saw blood on the side of her head. She hit a woman's parked car. The woman called 911 over the car and then called again, stating that we need an ambulance for this young woman because she's hurt. She asked Renisha if she knew her home number. Renisha didn't know it. She asked where her cell phone was. Renisha couldn't find her cell phone. She was wandering back and forth away from the crash site. At one point, she went to one end of the block, went to another end of the block, and then eventually she just disappeared. About 3 hours later, she shows up at Ted Wafer's home, which is also within a mile from the crash site. And she's knocking on his door. According to Ted Wafer, there was somebody banging and knocking on both of his doors, the side door and the front door. And it was just getting louder and louder, and he thought someone was trying to break into his home. That's what he said. So he takes his shotgun, a Mossburg 12-gauge pistol grip shotgun. He goes to the front door and opens it, and he says he didn't know it was loaded and that he didn't mean to point it at Renisha McBride. He just said the gun just discharged. It just went off. The blast hit her in the face, killing her instantly. He calls 911 and says, I've just shot somebody on my porch, banging on the door. When the police get there, he tells them it was an accidental discharge. He didn't know the gun was loaded. Then he gets into the police station and makes these statements about it was an accident, discharge, didn't know it was loaded. And then later on he says, well, you know, I was mad, talking about a prior incident, a run-in he had with some people in the neighborhood. I was mad and I was full of piss and vinegar. I want to, you know, get to the bottom of this. Who's banging on my door? And that's why he went to the door with a shotgun. So at first the police wrote it off as an accident and weren't going to do any more investigating. Brother by the name of Yusef Bunchy Shakur, sister by the name of Dream Hampton, and several other people here in Detroit said, no, this will not stand. This man needs to be arrested. This crime needs to be thoroughly investigated, and we're expecting charges because you don't shoot someone in the face with a shotgun accidentally and just walk away with it. So about 2 weeks later, he was arrested and charged with second-degree murder. That was in November of 2013. November 2nd, 2013, same anniversary date as the liberation of Assata Shakur from prison. That was the morning on which Renisha McBride was murdered. The trial was held here in Detroit on July 21st. And on August 7th, Jonathan Jackson Day, Theodore Wafer was found guilty of second-degree murder, statutory manslaughter, and a felony firearms violation. He's scheduled to be sentenced on August 25th.
That's a great synopsis of what's happened. But it sounds like that without that initial pressure from activists within the community that nothing would have been done?
Well, that's how it happens most times. Without that initial pressure, police will not do the job that they are supposed to do, which is investigate a crime. Turn the results of their investigation over to the district attorney, who determines whether or not charges should be filed. They didn't do it in the Zimmerman case. They don't do it in many cases, most cases. It took them about 2 weeks to charge Johannes Mesley with the murder of Oscar Grant. So, we end up, when it becomes African people who are the victims of crime, we end up having to do extra work in order to get the police, the state, to do the job it says it is supposed to be doing.
Can you talk about why it is that you decided to go to Detroit to cover this trial? I mean, hadn't you really already looked at these issues in the Oscar Grant case? What drew you to Detroit for the Renisha McBride trial?
Well, like everybody else, when I first heard about it, a 19-year-old sister gets shot in the face with a shotgun, and she's not doing anything. Of course, that concerned me just like it would concern anyone else with common sense. And I began to hear, as time went on, rumblings about the fact that maybe this young girl was not as innocent as the quote-unquote liberal media was portraying her. Subsequently, I found out that the defense was trying to portray her as a criminal and a thug who was up to no good, and that's how she ended up on Ted Wafer's porch that night. And the straw for me came, I won't say it was March, it may have been March, but the straw came for me a couple of months ago, that straw that broke that camel's back, when I heard that the man's defense attorney, Cheryl Carpenter, stated that, well, maybe Renisha McBride thought she was breaking into her drug dealer's house. Maybe that's why he was there that day. And at that point, I decided, okay, I'm going to Detroit, because they are going to make this victim responsible for her own death. They're going to try to completely absolve this man, and they're going to drag her through the mud. They're going to criminalize and vilify her. And I just said, I have to go.
So tell us about that process, because if you're a revolutionary journalist, I don't know any revolutionary journalists that are rich. How did you go about making preparations to go to Detroit and cover this trial?
I decided to do what they're calling now crowdfunding, which is basically you're asking for money, for people to support you. Most journalists are employed by a news organization which is dependent upon advertising dollars. And we know that in the last few years, the news industry has taken a hit, partly because of the rise of the internet. People are getting their news for free. Therefore, they're not necessarily buying or reading newspapers, in addition to not trusting what the media says. Right. And so their readership, their advertising base has dwindled. Lots of journalists are out of work now, and lots of them are doing freelance work or other stuff. And so for me, I consider myself to be a grassroots people's journalist. So I went to people directly. I said, I believe that telling the story of how this young black girl died is important. If you believe it's important also, here's how you can support me. I kind of came up with a budget. I probably lowballed it, but I came up with a number. This is what I need in order to go do this work. I asked for the money, and I was able to get the money, and I'm still here in Detroit.
Okay. Thandisizwe, can you also tell us about the first day of court? What does it mean when you walk into a situation like a courtroom like this, and you're not part of the official recognized media within a city? How does that all work?
Well, the court doesn't know that I'm an independent journalist. The court sees us all as media. Other media people might look at me askance or askew, but it doesn't really matter. I'm not going to get thrown out unless I do some type of outburst in the courtroom, which I have been tempted to do, because even though I'm a journalist, even though I'm media, even though my primary reason in being there is to observe and report back to my community, I'm still a new African woman in America. And when I see an injustice, it pricks at me the way it wouldn't prick at somebody from the New York Times. So I'll be sitting there wanting to call somebody a liar, and I have to keep my mouth shut. But the first day of court, the first day of the trial, they did 2 days of jury selection. It wasn't actual testimony. the picking of the jury, seating of the jury is part of the trial. And what they do is the process of voir dire, of questioning the jurors, which is usually done by the defense and the prosecutor. This judge took that process over herself. She took some of the questions from the prosecution, some of the questions from the defense, she said, and I never did get to see the actual questionnaire that all of the jurors filled out. But in court, she was asking some questions out loud. And one of the questions she asked was, are African-American members of the jury going to feel a need or a sense of loyalty and a need to bring in a guilty verdict? And I sat there with I think my mouth fell open. I had to, remind myself, I had to catch myself and close my mouth. This crime happened in a place called Dearborn Heights in Michigan. It did not happen in Detroit. But Dearborn Heights, which is, sits right outside of Detroit, is home to one of the largest Middle Eastern populations outside of, quote unquote, the Middle East, middle of what, east of where, if it's not the largest population, it is one of the largest populations. And there were no questions about, do the Caucasian or white jurors feel a sense of loyalty? Do the Middle Eastern or Arab American jurors feel a sense of loyalty? It was only directed toward African American jurors. And the prosecutor, the defense attorney, other pundits have said, well, this case is not about race. Well, in the beginning, it may not have been, but it became about race at that particular moment. So I'm still trying to figure out how that question was even allowed, and if it actually came from the defense or if it came from the judge. Nobody will answer that question for me, right? So that was jury selection. And then you have a thing that's called peremptory strikes, where each side, prosecution and defense, gets to dismiss a potential juror for no particular reason. We just don't want this particular juror. So naturally the defense, which had 9 peremptory strikes, they struck 5 of the black folks from the jury pool. It was at that point that the prosecutor raised the Batson challenge. A Batson challenge is a legal case, Batson versus Kentucky, a Supreme Court case, which states that even though a peremptory strike means that you can just strike whoever you want, you can't just strike all of the black people from the jury pool. You cannot do it. So a Batson challenge was raised by the prosecutor. The remedy was said to be bring back one of the struck jurors. I did not catch the entire discussion about why that person was not brought back, but they were not brought back. And by the end of the day, by the end of jury selection, once they had seated their jury, the defense had struck 2 more black folk. So they've now used 7 of their 9 peremptory challenges to strike black people from the jury. But the defense says this is not about race. And this is how we start out. Questions directed solely at the African-American jurors, and 9 of them taken out from the jury pool. The final jury had 4 black folks on it, 2 brothers, 2 sisters, 3 people who me and a couple of other journalists identified as being of Middle Eastern descent, and the rest was 7 whites, 7 Caucasians. Now they had 12 jurors, and what we were told were 2 alternate. But just before jury deliberation began, 2 people were picked as alternates and dismissed from jury deliberation. One of those, I was told, was a white woman. The other one, I was told, was deemed to be of Middle Eastern descent. But most of the Detroit papers labeled them all as 4 blacks, 7 to 8 whites. They didn't even make they didn't even distinguish ethnically between who was on the jury.
There had been some allegations recently that some of the jurors felt pressured to give a guilty vote for the verdict, specifically by the black jurors. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, that was just some mindless chatter I saw on there are these different forums and websites that people spew all manner of theories about whatever is going on. And this was one of those websites that just knew he was going to get off, possibly manslaughter, being nice about it. On the other extreme, well, if it's going to be a hung jury, it's going to be the blacks on the jury that hang the jury, because black people are incapable of looking at a situation fairly and objectively and coming to what someone else would think is a sane conclusion. And so the most recent comment I saw was that it was the black folks who had bullied the 7 other, quote unquote, 7 or 8 other people who were defined as white. It's just really sad, really. Right. But the honest truth is that we do not know what their thinking was. We do not know what went on behind closed doors because they chose not to speak with the media, and that is the right of every juror. They are not compelled. They do not have to speak to the media. But they were polled once the verdict was read, and they all stated that that was their vote.
Thandisizwe, in terms of the length of the trial, how long had it been estimated that this trial would take?
It was estimated from the beginning to be approximately 3 weeks.
And how long did it take?
The actual, I guess, testimony plus the, what do you call that? The testimony plus the jury selection took 10 days, and deliberation of a day and a half.
What was the sense there at the trial? Was it that they would come back very quickly with a verdict, or was there, amongst people even in the media and in the room, there wasn't clarity about what the final verdict would be from the jury?
Well, I remember I got to the courthouse that day, and one of the deputies even said, "I think it's going to be today." I don't know if they had been buzzing and talking, or I don't really know. Maybe people felt that some of the way that the testimony had been presented, it was clear and cut and dry. But definitely, it came. The decision came the next day. I mean, again, I cannot speculate on what the jurors were thinking, but the fact that Ted Wafer gave such inconsistent statements, it was an accident, it was self-defense. Obviously, they did not buy the part about it being self-defense. They also did not buy the filthy and vile racist narrative that the defense had put forth.
And so what was the mood within the community, the African community, that you found when you first arrived in the city and has been subsequent since the verdict?
When I first got here, there were a lot of people who thought that had someone, if they had been in that same situation, they would have either shot through the door or called 911 and told 911, "I'm about to shoot someone." That was coupled with the other extreme of he should have waited and called 911. That was when I first got here. Now that the verdict is over, a lot of people have either expressed exhilaration or pleasant surprise. A lot of people have been resigned to believe that a white perpetrator of violence against black people is going to get off. And that's not due to paranoia. That's not due to, a negative attitude. That's just historical fact. That's usually what happens. And so a lot of people said they were pleasantly surprised.
In your travels throughout the country, increasingly that what we're seeing is that people actually do get off when they, not just the average citizen, but the police, security guards, anyone who protects.
Well, the police have historically, for a police officer to say, "I thought the person had a gun," or they were resisting arrest, that's like a get out of jail free card. That has historically happened. So yeah, most definitely. Now this case with Wafer, because of media, the media chooses to mention some things and it chooses not to, or it'll emphasize certain things to the detriment of other things. So the case with Renisha, it's not about a drunk woman who showed up on the porch trying to break in, which was the defense's narrative. She was not trying to break in, but I believe she did want entry, and she was banging on the door loudly so that someone would hear her and come to the door. Now, what people don't understand, or what we don't know, is why Ted Wafer's door. Only 1 or 2 people, and that's, again, on the internet, have put forth a hypothesis of why she picked that house. And we believe it's because it had a somewhat similar resemblance to her own home. I was able to physically go to Ted Wafer's house. I physically went to the house that Renisha McBride lived in at that time, and I took the photograph. And I can see how someone in her condition may have thought that was her home. But that's an equally plausible theory that could have been presented to the jury. But the defense attorney decided to take the tried and trusted route of the black menace. She's a criminal. She's a thug. She deals drugs. I don't even know where the drug dealing part came from. We know she consumed it, but she said she was a drug dealer at one point. Maybe she thought she was breaking into her drug dealer's house. There's really never been a reason given for why a 5'4" woman who's had a concussion, coming down from a high and intoxication, wanted to break into a house, other than the fact that she's just a thugged out criminal. And so Cheryl Carpenter, Ted Wafer's attorney, thought the jury was going to buy that, and they rejected it wholeheartedly. I was thinking it was going to be either between acquittal or manslaughter. They voted for second-degree murder.
What will that turn out to be in terms of years sentenced?
I don't know what the minimum is. The max is life in prison. It's probably going to be up to the judge's discretion, but on a second-degree murder, I cannot see anything less than 5 years. Even though I'm not a legal person, I don't know what's the laws here in Michigan. Manslaughter in California is between 2 and 6. It's not the same everywhere. People are saying, well, there's no intent and, blah, blah. That's not what was read to the jury. The prosecutors only had to prove one of 3 states of mind to get a conviction for second-degree murder. And what they proved was that the Ted Wafer act in a way that was just so reckless, had such a disregard that his actions were likely to cause death. And when you can say that you're in fear of your life, you can say that you think someone's breaking into your home, but once you make a decision to unlock a steel front door, in other words, it has not been damaged, so someone's not trying to break into it, but once you make the decision to unlock and open that door, and you raise your shotgun with your finger on the trigger, and you pull that trigger, and it blasts through a locked screen door and hits a 19-year-old child in the face, your self-defense goes out the window.
Yes. So very quickly, Thandisizwe, are you going to write a book about this, or is this going to be a series of articles?
Well, I've already done the articles recapping the case. I am thinking now, I'm trying to decide, I want to say trying to decide if I'm going to write a book on this case. I really don't think I'm going to write a book solely on this case. I think what I want to do is take a look at another case in terms of how black women have fared under the state, and combine Renisha's story with another sister story. That's kind of what I'm feeling.
That's perfect. Can you please give your website so how people can reach you and support your work as well?
At the moment, my website it's not under construction. Well, it's kind of open for business during construction. That's Thandisizwe.net. THANDISIZWE, Thandisizwe.net. I live tweeted from the trial at IB Wells.